the party, that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that.
Hey everyone, my name is Andre Walton, the Southeast Regional Organizer for OWR, and welcome to The Revolution. Today my guest is a candidate for the 37th Assembly District of Wisconsin, Abigail Lowery. How you doing today, Abby?
Good, thank you. Thanks for interviewing me today.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for office.
My name is Abigail Lowery. I'm running in the 37th Assembly District. That includes Northeast Dane County, like DeForest, where I live, and then goes east to include Columbus, Waterloo, Watertown, and various small towns and villages in between. I am currently a stay-at-home parent of 2 kids that are in elementary school. I am also a village trustee here in DeForest. I've been in that role for over 3 years now. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really rewarding to represent people and try to get their voices heard in public policy. Previously, I was a special education teacher and also worked in various positions supporting people with developmental disabilities. I am running for office for a multitude of reasons. I could go back to when I was a special education teacher. My first year teaching was during Act 10. I went with my fellow teachers to the Capitol and really experienced for the first time as a teacher, what it's like to be disrespected and, your whole profession disregarded. And also saw the importance of collective bargaining, not just for pay, but working conditions as well. A teacher's working conditions are essentially the same as students' learning conditions. And I really felt it was important that teachers have some say in that because, we're the ones that work the closest with the students in the classrooms and see what they need and how we can best support them. And I kind of saw the aftermath of Act 10 where our voices weren't really as valued, and I know I had a hard time advocating for what my students needed because, to be honest, nobody was really asking me or asking us as teachers, and we were expected to do more with less, a lot of testing, and fewer resources, because around that same time, education funding was getting seriously cut. And as a special education teacher, I worked with kids with special needs, so that really impacted them. They're the ones that really need a lot of support, a lot of resources available for them to have the individualized education that they need. But I also worked in a school that had a lot of students from lower income backgrounds. And so they also are students that really need education, public education, to level the playing field for them. I'll try to go through the other reasons real quick why I'm running. I could probably talk all day on this. After I was a special education teacher and started staying home full time with my kids, I was reaching out to my state legislators more and quickly got disenchanted with them. They weren't really listening to me. I rarely get any kind of response back from a basic email or phone call message. And that's really disappointing to me as I'm a current elected official, and it's not even a full time like it is for these state legislators. And I wouldn't even think to just not respond to a constituent reaching out to me. That's like the bare minimum requirement of the job. And then also one other thing was my brother has autism and lives in a group home here in the state. And a few years ago, he experienced a couple of difficult situations with his group home and the agency that was supporting him. One time he was locked in his house with the staff outside. He had no way to get out or to communicate if there was any kind of emergency. And another time he had medications missing and expensive personal items missing. And I reached out to my state legislators to see if they could help with maybe new regulations or look at new legislation. And they had no interest and didn't even seem to connect with me on a personal level, just how it feels as a family member to see this happening with a loved one. And my opponent has a daughter with special needs, so he knows these kind of issues. And I saw clearly with that his um, party leadership and what they want him to do is more important than what is actually right for his constituents. So that's what's motivating me to run. So
Yeah, and I think everybody has that reason why they got involved in politics or running for office. So I always like to ask that question, and that's definitely makes sense why you wanted to run for office. It's very clear. But you're running against a very entrenched Republican. How has he represented the district as far as policy goes? As you said, he's not really responsive to your needs. Is he like that with most constituents?
oh yeah, the people that I've talked to, one example is a lady that is in like total opposite side of the district from me, uh, and also kind of a different setting. She's in more of a rural, small town setting with a lot of farms and agriculture. And one of her big issues and a local group that she's a part of, big issue is clean water, especially impacted by the large factory farm nearby. And she told me that she hasn't really gotten anywhere or much response or help from her state legislators, including my opponent. She shared that she even went to the state capitol as part of a clean water day and let them know that she was coming. And not only was the state representative not there, but his office was closed. Nobody was there for her to access. And I've heard that from other people that they go to his work site to reach out to him, which it's actually his job to reach out to his constituents. And even then, he's not usually available. And I also know with like my number one issue of passing nonpartisan redistricting legislation, I know that he's against that. He said it at public forums. And that's also against his constituents because 2 of the 4 counties within the district, they've passed resolutions saying that they want nonpartisan redistricting, that it's important. And it's also has a lot of support just across the state in general. And that tells me he's against it because I think he knows that's what keeps his seat, safe in his eyes.
Yeah, I
Safe.
definitely want to ask more about that as well because before 2010, that seat was actually held by a Democrat before the districts changed. Obviously, he's a Republican. He's had that seat for a little while now. Can you tell us about the effects that gerrymandering has had on this district?
Yeah, well, it's really obvious where I live in DeForest. We are a small community, only around 10,000 people, and we're carved up into 3 assembly districts and 3 Senate districts. And that's the same for nearby in Windsor, which also has a part of it in the 37th district. And it makes it really hard for, like I know being on the village board, we reach out to our 6 legislators and usually maybe only 1 or 2 of them even respond to our local concerns, and we're elected officials, so you think that there might be some clout or some motivation for them to respond back. The same for Windsor right next door. Other parts in the district that they might not necessarily be carved up in quite the same way as DeForest and Windsor, you can definitely see that there's an impact on their communities. Like Columbus, the whole city Columbus is in the 37th district, but other parts of that greater community that's probably part of the same school district, like the town of Columbus, is not in that district. Or same with Watertown. City of Watertown is in the 37th district, but not the town of Watertown. And it makes it really hard for us, not only because if we're not staunch Republicans, we're already having a hard time getting our voices heard in this gerrymandered district. But also, if we want to build like coalitions in our community, it's very hard. We have to look at the map and see. I mean, up until I moved a few months ago, my house in the other part of DeForest I lived on, it was literally the dividing line between 2 assembly districts, and I had to kind of figure out that my side of the street was in my district, but my neighbors across the street weren't. And then even if you went down a ways, eventually the people across the street were in the same district, but trying to figure out where that turning point was, democracy and voting in general should be as easy as possible, and things like these gerrymandered maps makes people getting their voices heard a lot more difficult, and that's not right. So
Exactly. You have a situation where politicians are choosing their voters and their voters not choosing their politicians, which is completely, I don't know, insane idea, but it's literally what we have.
yeah.
Moving on a little bit, earlier you talked about special education and how you were a teacher for special education, and you talk about wanting to fund special education more, which I don't hear a lot from candidates, so it really is interesting to me. Can you tell me a little bit about the current state of funding for special education, and what would you like to see change for it?
Well, one of the big issues is that over 50% of special education is funded with the local school districts. And the state and federal government aren't doing their fair share, which impacts obviously the local school districts financially, but also impacts those students. Like the federal government made dedication 40 or so years ago when they passed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, that they would fund about, I think it was about 40% of special education costs. They're not anywhere near that. I think they're like 20%. And I know with Governor Evers' last budget, he was trying to increase state funding so the state would provide more of the funding for special education. And it came up quite a bit short of what his goal was, the eventual passed budget. And the reason why it obviously impacts the school districts because, to be honest, funding for special education is more expensive per student than for other students that don't have as many special needs. I mean, they need, extra support personnel. They need maybe some technological tools. They need access to different therapies, different gadgets like a wiggly seat. There's just a whole spectrum of things that they need in their classrooms that make it more expensive. And then also it's not very equitable either because not all school districts have the same property tax base to pull from. And I guess this is a problem with probably our education system in general in Wisconsin, but it really puts certain school districts at a disadvantage in not only funding public education where they live, but also special education funding, which is more expensive. And if we really want education to level the playing field, we need to also level the playing field with, maybe not relying so much on property taxes in local communities.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I think most of us don't really understand all that goes into special education needs and funding. So I'm definitely glad that you brought that topic up and kind of staying along with children and funding. You're a mother of how many kids do you have?
Two.
Two. You're a mother of two, and so I'm guessing preserving the planet is pretty important to you. So what is your stance on climate action, and what would you like to propose if elected?
Yeah, I am definitely interested in that topic area, and I know that Representative Greta, oh gosh, I'm forgetting her last name, but I apologize. It'll probably come to me later. I know that she's put forward a lot of legislation recently to work on climate crisis, and similar to a lot of issues that Democrats back, it often doesn't even get a public hearing. So definitely, if it doesn't get a public hearing in the committees, it's not going to be brought to the floor or voted on. And so I would want to get elected so I can help get Democrats in the majority so we can bring those great pieces of legislation forward. Things that would help us move towards more green energy, renewable energy, that obviously would reduce our use of carbon sourced energy, and then also would kind of expand our workforce, the jobs that are available too. I do worry about that a lot with my two kids, and I have to admit that's not a strong area of like background knowledge for me, but I am studying more on that. So, and I definitely want to look to colleagues that already have legislation or proposed legislation that I would want to support. So
yeah, no worries. And I don't expect everybody to be an expert on everything. It's just important that you care about the issues. is what we try to get out of candidates. So you talked a little bit about unionization with Act 10 a little bit earlier. So what is your stance on the minimum wage and unionization?
Yeah, well, I think the minimum wage is way too low and has been for a long time. The thing that bothers me with that is people can be working really hard at full-time jobs and still not be able to afford decent housing where they live or health care. And that's unacceptable to me. I think a lot of people would say if you're working hard, putting in 40 or whatever hours per week, that you should be able to live off that job. And especially if you have kids or other people that are depending on you for your wages. And I think I'm kind of interested in, I'm kind of looking into that more, but either the state, raising the whole state minimum wage, or allowing local communities to set that, because I know each community has a different cost of living, where $15 an hour might be way more than enough. In other places, $15 an hour might seriously not be enough. So it's kind of hard to set, know what the right dollar amount is. And I know $15 an hour was kind of the goal a few years ago, and maybe that's up even more with, inflation and things like that. I know local control has been taken away a lot in our state, and maybe that's something that local control could be given back to, because those are the people that know how much it actually costs to live in those communities. In terms of unionization, I think unions help a lot in that negotiation of making sure that people that work in those jobs, sorry, my kids, the people that work in those jobs are paid a living wage, and maybe also have benefits that, kind of add more value to those jobs, and maybe alleviate if there is any kind of shortfall with the wages, because definitely you get a lot of value out of your benefits as well.
But going on, we're actually changing subjects just a little bit. So
Sure.
Wisconsin, like most states, has not yet legalized marijuana, and we can see that there's disparities in how it's executed as far as on the justice side of things. We know that if you're black and you use marijuana, you're more likely to be punished for it, rather if you're white. What is your stance on the legalization of marijuana, and also maybe some possible benefits of legalizing it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I've been thinking about that lately quite a bit and looking into it. I think that marijuana should be regulated very similarly to how we do alcohol. Um, I definitely believe in personal freedom, so I don't see why government needs to get into that, especially when the things that I've read about marijuana, that there's not hardly any negative, health or behavioral consequences. And the ones that do exist, from my understanding, they're not any more severe than alcohol. And so, obviously you might regulate it with how people can drive their vehicles, or if there's a certain level of having too much marijuana in their system. But I'll let kind of the experts tease that out. But I do see marijuana as an issue that has been used to disproportionately negatively affect like communities of color, and maybe people from lower income backgrounds. And I don't see why, because there's not much evidence of, any serious societal harm, that people would be arrested or, find big amounts of money due to that. And I think there could be benefits as well in, more equitable treatment under the law that I already mentioned, but also, you can tax, just like you tax alcohol with sales tax, or you can tax marijuana, whatever level you want. And from my understanding, because Wisconsin, as opposed to the other Midwestern states around it, is one of the few states that doesn't have any like medical marijuana. We haven't quite, taken the incremental steps to legalizing it, that people in other states from what I understand, might be coming to Wisconsin to get their marijuana because they don't have the sales tax, because it's not sanctioned by the government, and so it's probably relatively cheap here. And I think if we are having people to come here and buy marijuana, or even current residents, I think that's a source of revenue that we would want to take advantage of, and maybe it would help. I guess there's so many things that you could do with that extra funding. I mean, it could be working on renewable energy sources. It could be increasing our education funding. I guess, whatever, I guess depends on the amount of money and where that can best be put to use. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is pretty funny that Republicans talk about, increasing freedom, get the government off your back, but they want to punish people for using a substance that's known to have less harmful effects than alcohol use. But I think a big reason why a lot of these issues that we care about aren't addressed is very much due to money in politics and the influence of money. Politicians tend to shape their policy in favor of their big donors rather than their constituents. What is your stance on the influence of money in politics, and what would you support if elected?
Well, the most obvious thing to me is I think the state legislature should pass a resolution so that we can have a statewide referendum on Citizens United's decision, and having a constitutional amendment taking big money out of politics, saying that only individuals have constitutional rights, and that money is not the same as free speech. It can and should be regulated. I think that's one obvious thing, because I think if we do that statewide referendum, Wisconsinites will make it clear that we don't think that big money interests should have more influence over the political process than regular individuals. And that's another way that we could level the playing field. Regular folks with regular amounts of money do not have a reasonable amount of influence in the political process like they should, because we have these big money interests that can just throw money at candidates or issues and get whatever they want passed. And that's why people like me and you, we reach out to our legislators, and they may not be interested in listening to us. Another thing that we can do is, I know that they're currently in Wisconsin, if certain like PACs associated with big corporations like Walmart, they don't have to register with the state with their political spending, as long as they're not spending more than 50% of their spending in Wisconsin. So that means that we don't know who their donors are, and where that source of money is when they run ads here in Wisconsin. I think we need more transparency. If there's people, especially if out-of-state interests are trying to sway our voters or the outcomes of our elections, we need to know what their sources of money are, and the donors. It should not be secret. So those are two big things that come to mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge issue, and I firmly believe that we need to change that if we want to have any true say in our democracy and say in our political situation. But how can people get involved in your campaign? How can they help out? How can they reach you?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. I have Facebook and Twitter pages. Facebook.com /Lowery for Wisconsin, and Lowery for Wisconsin spelled out LOWERY Same for Twitter, twitter.com /LOWERYFORWI. And then surprise, surprise, my website is LoweryForWisconsin.com, LOWERYFORWI.com. And through my website, there's different ways to get in contact with me, either just to send me a message or to indicate interest in volunteering. And there's a lot of different volunteer options that way. The most pressing is that we just got our yard sign, so people can indicate on there if they want to host a yard sign. And then also through my website, of course, is a donate button, because pretty much everything you want to do with a campaign is expensive, and I don't have big money interests knocking on my doors to donate, and I don't really want it either. So all my donations, most of my donations come from like literally like $25 donations in that level so far on average. So yeah, anything that people can do to contribute, it doesn't matter really the dollar amount, as long as it's under $1,000, is greatly appreciated. So
awesome. Well, I hope people will go and donate to you, because if we want candidates that work for us, we have to donate to them and incentivize them not to sell out. So please go and donate to Abby's campaign. Help her out any way you can. Is there anything else you want to say before we end the interview?
Just that I really want to get elected on November 3rd, because I just really want people in the 37th district to have better representation. They're long overdue, and I will fight really hard to make sure their voices are heard.
Well, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Abby, and you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.
So we always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.